So something much less controversial, a bit closer to my heart. Not so much news as a new report. Avi Goldfarb, I know well, is quite a pioneer in terms of understanding AI from the business and strategic perspective. I think he's at University of Toronto. And what he's talking about here, and this is from the Brookings Institute, so a bit of a change of gears, but interesting nonetheless, is interesting title, Why is AI Adoption in Healthcare Lagging? What he talks about, and it's something I talk about a lot in my course, is what we call in economics, and these guys are Rotman Chair of Artificial Intelligence, and these guys have kind of pioneered this, is what's called the productivity paradox. I think I've mentioned this before, but he's particularly talking about how it's affecting healthcare, because they've done some studies. If you look at this, it's on brookings.edu, and we will put links, of course, in the description. But they've done some quantitative research and found that in healthcare, there's very few job openings that require AI, which means there's not a lot of interest going and not a lot of energy going into it, even though AI healthcare is such a big topic. So the question is, why is that? Why is it lagging behind? Why is healthcare not in front like the same way financial services is, or just technology in general? And it comes down to this thing called the productivity paradox. And a number of the key items there, what this productivity paradox is it's typical of any emerging technology wave. And that's one of the key items is what we call, when I can think of the word, complementary innovations. There it is, when I can find it. Complementary things. And the general point is, you look at AI and you think, oh, in healthcare, it can do all of these amazing things. The problem is you can't just use it. You've got to build a load of complementary stuff first, or get through a load of complementary challenges in order to start using that technology to its fullest. And so this is where you see a lot of lag in healthcare. So some of the interesting elements for healthcare that I noted and extrapolated from this, one of them is explainable AI. So that's a big buzzword right now, is explainable AI. But think about that in healthcare. It's critical because your AI is a doctor, and it's got to explain its diagnosis in whatever you're doing. Obviously, if you're just doing scanning paperwork, that's different. But basically, explainable AI becomes a critical driving factor for AI adoption within healthcare. And explainable AI is kind of in its infancy. It's very new. It's very immature. Some people are doing it. It's really not there yet. So that becomes a bit of a limiting factor, and that helps them lag. Another is that the terrible data they have in the healthcare system.
I was just going to say that, yeah.
We joke about doctors' notes all the time, but that's kind of systemic within the healthcare system, is the data is notoriously bad. So in order to build all these wonderful models to do amazing things like radiology or diagnosis, you need good data. And if your data's handwritten doctor's notes, then you're in a world of trouble. Yeah. So that's another one. Regulation, of course, becomes a critical one in healthcare because you can't share data. Or if you can, it's jumping through hurdles and hoops. And of course,
the data sharing agreements are a nightmare just between two organizations, let alone pooling the data. Unless Google just buys it all like they did last year, where they just got everything for free.
They mention exactly that point in here. Just even sharing between organizations is a nightmare, and also internally. So obviously, innovation in healthcare requires product companies with data scientists to get data to actually build stuff and say, yes, we can make this work, and start rolling it out. If you can't get that, it slows everything down, and that's where you get lag. And the last one that they mentioned, interestingly, and this is typical of every technology wave, is misalignment, and in particular, people not wanting to lose their jobs, because you get, they mentioned Jeff Hinton, who's a pioneer in neural networks, saying that deep learning now is so good, we can get rid of all the radiologists. They shouldn't even be there because machine learning now can do it better than they can. Now, imagine you're going to a radiology department and saying, would you like to buy our system? Oh, by the way, it's going to replace you all. That obviously is a bit of a stumbling block to adoption.
Now, to be fair, when he said that years and years and years ago, he put a date on it, I believe, and we crossed that through that date, and we're nowhere close. Like that, if you look at all the studies, they're not nearly as accurate. We're just not there yet. So it was a bold claim, and it may eventually come true, but it hasn't come to pass yet. But yeah, I would agree that there are a lot of folks who are scared that that would be the case. But that's just standard. So it's realignment within the career space of like, you need to reskill. You need to reskill. This thing is going to surpass you at scale. You need to reskill. We need to take you and put you on something else, or have you vet them. Have you trained those systems, or then have you vet those systems and audit those systems, or something like that.
And that's interesting, because the key with this idea of this productivity paradox, it's not tied to AI. It's every technology wave. And what's interesting to understand is, once you understand this, you realize why we get this question all the time: where's the ROI? Because people are saying, where's the AI? We expected it to be on this hype cycle, and we're in this type of disillusionment. And I think it's a lot to do with this, that we overestimate. We just see the sparkle and the sizzle and think, wow, we can start using that. It's only when we try that we realize, oh, we've got to put all this other stuff in place first. That's hard work and costs lots of money. Yeah. We'll get there.
Well, in the health industry, I don't know if you remember the story of Jim Clark from Netscape, and he went off and he built Healthion, and he drew Healthion and the little logo and put it in the middle of the health industry, and he said, we're going to solve the health industry, and he raised $1 billion and spent $1 billion or something crazy, and then shut the whole thing down. He said, wow, this is a really hard market. It's a really, this is a U.S. case, but it's a really tough market to crack. It's very fragmented. It's very complex, and anybody who sort of jumps in and says, I'm going to fix it all, fails every single time, because of the inherent complexity and the fragmentation of that space. So I would agree that anybody who says, oh, AI is going to solve healthcare's problems, good luck, right? The data's bad, the systems are fragmented. Until everybody's literally on Cerner and whatever the other big company is, the electronic health records companies, until everything is in there where they have access to like half of the data for the country and the other one has access to the other half of the data, until we're somewhere close to that, I just don't see this happening at scale.
This is where, and I talk about this in the economics, when I talk about economics of AI, this is where you see this pattern of things being painfully slow in the beginning.
Right.
Because behind the scenes, what people are doing are putting these foundations in place.
Right.
Because they have to. Then you see the explosive growth, because once the foundations are done, then you can start rolling all this stuff out, and you've educated yourself in the meantime.
Right.
But by the way, what you just said, I think, is a great parable for Silicon Valley. Raised $1 billion, spent $1 billion, and shut the business down.
Right, and I think it start with the hubris of, I will solve what nobody else has solved. Let me raise $1 billion, spend $1 billion, and then shut the business down.